Welcome to the Painting Insights podcast. We have been working on something in the background.
That's right. We've actually started a Patreon channel. For the last couple of months, we've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings and all kinds of additional treats, which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
And we have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. Hello and welcome to the end of season 4 for the Painting Insights podcast. Ordinarily, I would do this end of season video with Richard, but as you can tell, I am solo. Obviously, for listeners, you may not be able to tell, but I am solo for this final insert, or whatever you'd call it, episode of the podcast. So what I'm going to do is go through a few things that I'd like to discuss about season 4, season 5, the bonus shows, and potential upcoming events to do with the podcast. First, let's quickly recap season 4, because I was really just so privileged to speak to all of these artists. I mean, what an amazing group of people. All of them had such different pieces of knowledge and pieces of themselves to contribute to this incredible platform of professional artists sharing all of this information and these stories from being professional painters. I just find it to be so enriching to kind of revisit when I'm editing, and I'll go into this in a minute, but I've started a highlights channel, so I revisit them again for the highlights. In fact, you know what? I'll get that out of the way first. If you're not aware, on YouTube, I have created a Painting Insights highlights channel, and that is where I have just short snippets. It'll just be an answer from one of the guests, just a random answer to a question, but I don't include the question. And it started off where I had the video of the artist and just them talking. And then at one point, it changed over to being the artwork instead of an image of the artist. It was the images that they painted, a kind of slideshow of a few images, and that would scroll across the screen in close-up as they were discussing the answer for whatever question I'd asked. And that created this quite interesting balance, because instead of what happens on the episode, where you'll be looking at me and the guest, or Richard and I talking to a guest, and maybe an image inserted or a video. Instead, it's all of the images of people removed and just the artwork. And whether they're talking about their own artwork or someone else's, to see their artwork up close whilst they discuss this recontextualizes the conversation in quite a subtle and interesting way. So I really recommend checking it out if you haven't already. There will be a link in the description of the video and the audio platform for this episode. So please check it out, support it, and subscribe, because it's a new way of introducing little bite-sized pieces of information and insights throughout the channel itself. There's been lots of videos already, because it's I upload a video every weekday. So Monday to Friday, there will be an upload, and I promote it on Instagram. So I've been trying to make people aware that this is a new platform. It's doing well, but I think the more people know about it, the more you can utilize that resource in case you want to know why someone uses the colors they do, or what to do for artist block, or about daily writing. All of these things are included in the videos that are already up. And there are lots more that are being uploaded, ready for the weeks to come. So that's the highlights channel. That's out of the way. But that is an opportunity for me to revisit the conversations from previous seasons of the podcast to the more recent uploads. And having people like, for example, Yoruma, who had an episode back to back, 1 week to the next, as the first guest who has had that, because I just thought she was so lovely in the way that she was sharing all this information and all of this knowledge that she had accrued over the years. And it was just very refreshing. Her energy was just so light and infectious, made me want to go out plein air painting. So here's a clip from Yoruma's first episode.
Like every artist, I think there will be no finishing line. I don't think there is, now I'm here.
Yeah.
That will be the dead of my paintings, I think.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, my goals changed too, because in the beginning I was really impressed by artists. When I have a look at it now, I think, no, that's not the way I want to paint. But in the beginning, they were heroes for me. And it changed more and more. And my direction is more and more to go in this loosely style of painting, in this really impressionistic style. And sometimes I still feel like I'm in a cage of my illustrations while painting, because I'm still an illustrator. That's my illustration still feeds me. I want to be much more free and loosely, and during one painting I have all these stages in one painting, to begin quite messy, and then there is always a stage I think, I'm really close to what I want to tell the viewer, and then I overpaint it. And it's very helpful to make videos of your painting process, not for an audience, only for yourself, because then you often see the exact moment you should have stopped. Mm-hmm. And that's my big topic. That's my big challenge, to learn when to stop my paintings.
Wow.
I can point out in every painting I ever did, I can point out when I missed the moment.
And is it always around the 1 hour mark?
Yeah. Nearly, yeah.
Now that's her first episode, and which was amazing. But straight afterwards, as I said, the week after, there was a second episode. So here's a clip from her second episode, the second part with Yoruma.
I will recommend another really good thing is to make pochettes that are oil sketches, little oil sketches, because we talked about the amount of paintings you have to paint. It doesn't depend on the size. Size does not matter. Every painting you do counts. So if you do many of small paintings, it's not a different to do many of big paintings. And in my workshops, I do this little pochettes.
Oh, lovely.
And I ask my students to do them by themselves. If you start on a big white canvas, it's overwhelming, and you don't know how to start, and you are scary and everything. And if I give you a size like this and say, paint it, yeah, okay, nothing could happen. It's only a small one. And I push my students to use, if you have a size like this, I take a brush like this.
Mm.
And with this relationship, you are pushed to simplify, because you can't get too fiddly with a big brush. And you will learn. It doesn't need to be only a few things on the canvas can capture the mood perfectly. If you have the right colors in the right place, even the shapes are wrong or too bold, you can capture a mood. And so you can do like this. I do it also for explaining things in my workshops, because I don't want to paint into the paintings of the students, but to solve it only by words and explaining, it's annoying. It's nearly not possible. But if I can show it in the small size, I can show it. And on top, the students see how fast I can capture his big paintings in this small one, and he can recognize by himself, oh, it doesn't need so much as I painted into my painting.
Now, after Yoruma, I would say the other person who had very similar infectious, happy, uplifting energy was Valerie Pillow. She's a wonderful artist and person. I was so privileged to have her on the podcast, and the way that she spoke about her enjoyment and engagement with painting the landscape since she'd moved to Bath, I thought was just lovely. So here is a clip from my conversation with Valerie Pillow.
99% of my work is done in one session, probably over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because this is, and that's my challenge this year, is that I would like to do bigger and find a way to still stay excited about my subject for more than 2 hours. But this is really like, it's just I get in the zone, and it's a lovely feeling, and I'm sure you get too, and most painters will understand, but I get in the zone for a short term, and after that it feels more like work, it feels more like a chore. So it's most of my painting I done quite quickly, but yeah, so it's always it's funny, but the moment I finish a painting, I'll like literally the last brushstroke, or when I put it on the shelf, I'm then thinking about the next one. And it's a bit of an addiction, but I'm like, so I'm not the one to dwell on the past and dwell on the work, and that's why I don't do many exhibition or things. I just don't like to, bring them back, and I just want to paint the next one. That's what I want to do. So, because I think that's A, because I want to get that excitement again, and B, because I think that's what's going to help me the most to learn to become a better painter. And so it's that kind of feeling, which I think it could be good, but I suppose it's not great if you want to start working larger or having more commitment about, okay, I need to do that area, I need to do this, I need to schedule my time. I like quite big, quite spontaneous, and just do it.
Also, there have been, amazing, diverse group of artists. All of them just such a pleasure to talk to, and such wonderful people. So, for example, here's a clip of my conversation with Devon Ceil Wishing.
One thing that I always come back to, and I think that this winds up applying in a lot of different ways. One real, for me, kind of turning point in my own, progression as a painter, was really the idea that the better you can understand something, I think the better you can depict it. And I think that a lot of times we sort of get like maybe not quite that message in art school. And what I mean by that is I think that a lot of times we're, in my experience at least, a lot of classes sort of almost attempt to train you to be kind of a almost like a thoughtless seeing machine, right? That they try to, almost in a way sort of take the thinking part out and say like, just stare at the thing and stare at the thing, right? And no, definitely. I mean, I think you do have to stare at the thing, right? No doubt. But I think for me, I mean, really, and this was one thing that really came about when I first came to study at GCA is, and it sounds really silly, but just the idea that like things look ways for reasons, right? That if something is happening up there, there's some reason why it looks that way and so like not some other way, right? And I think so much of my training prior to that had been essentially, you'd have a teacher come around and you'd be painting and they'd just say like, well, it needs to get redder there. And you'd go like, oh yeah, okay, right. And you'd sort of had this idea in the back of your head that like, if I just spend X number of years staring really hard, eventually my eyes will like be as good as theirs, I guess, and I think half the time it wasn't even that they were necessarily like, particularly any better than the students in some cases. I think it was just that it wasn't their painting. And so it's pretty easy to come around to somebody else's thing and spot something that's wrong, just because it's not yours. But, I think at GCA, I mean, people really started explaining things in terms of like, oh, this is happening and this is happening. And those two things are the reason that this is getting darker here, right? Or whatever, right? And all of a sudden it was like, oh, yeah, right. No, there's like things up there to actually understand. There's like principles at work that are, fairly repetitive and predictable in a lot of ways, right? That you can actually kind of like come to understand and like get a grasp of, how things actually work. Which, if you read old, sort of painting manuals and stuff from, the 17th century and stuff like that, very much, I mean, all those artists who were writing about it were very much thinking of painting as a way of coming to understand the world around them, right? And I think that component of it, I think maybe has, sort of diminished in a lot of like art education at this particular moment in history, right? That I think kind of gets left out. And, I always say the classic, sort of example of that, my students will, if any of them are listening to this will sound familiar, right? The classic sort of example I think is, I used to get taught in college, you'd always hear teachers say things like, draw what you see and not what you know, right? Which sounds like sort of this piece of great advice in a way. And in a way, I mean, I think there's a certain utilitarian quality to a piece of advice like that, particularly at first, because we're not very used to actually just like looking at things for a period of time, right? Like your friend mentioned. But to me, I think in one way, I think, I mean, it's maybe debatable whether that's even possible to kind of draw what you see. But I think to me, always we're using some combination of what we see and what we know when we're making a drawing. And to me, the goal wouldn't be so much to like, cut out knowledge. And, that's where I say, we're sometimes sort of encouraged, I think, to be a little bit of like almost sort of a mindless seeing machine, right? To me, I think that's not so much the goal. It's not to kind of exclude what we know. It's just to know the best possible stuff we can know, right? Like know better stuff, right? And then when you're combining that with, sort of this deep, intense, observation of what's in front of you, I think the two of those things pair up to give us such better results than either one would be able to give us, solely on its own.
Now, Devon does this amazing, immaculate painting, as you can tell, and there is a spectrum of realism that can be explored. So similar in its figurative studies, and yet obviously different in the way of having a more cinematic approach to the picture plane, is my conversation with John Broio. So here's a clip from that conversation.
At first, I wanted to go to, what is it, Art Center in near Los Angeles here, the Art Center College of Design, because I wanted to go there and learn how to do, conceptual work for film and do that. And my father thought it was more of a vocational school. He said, you're not going to be well-rounded, you'll be boring. and so go to an art school. So I went, well, I want to work at Lucasfilm. And I found a school in the University of California system. And I didn't even know much about him. I went, oh, wait, there's a guy here who paints representationally. I'll go to art school there. And it's not too far from where I wanted to work. And and as I got there, I went, oh, wait, hey, wait, this guy's kind of famous. and I noticed him in things. I went, wait, people do interviews and put his work up. There were other teachers there. One guy named David Hollowell from Yale. There was also a Bay Area painter named Wally Hedrick. I definitely took from a lot of them that Thibault had the most traditional, formal, representational approach. And I learned that from him. I think, and I've told people, I think really he taught me to paint. He didn't say how to make it interesting, but he taught me how to paint, I'd say in about one day. When he did a demonstration, he did a 4-hour painting from pure white to finished. And I watched the lay-in of those washes, the thinner darks to the thicker brights, the drawing, how it incorporates any drawing skills, and then standing back and going and seeing that the painting, even though not polished and finished, was complete and operating. I saw him do maybe 3 paintings start to finish, 3 or 4. And each time I was able to, see that same process and draw and take from it. He was very, very, he introduced words for things that I didn't know existed. He was able to articulate thoughts and leanings that I thought would go unexpressed. And then, you get in there and you find out, oh no, all of art history uses these. You go, oh, okay, maybe I'll do a little reading. What's the assignment, right?
Yeah.
But like any student, you sort of show up and then there'll be a day you miss and you look back on that and go, why did I skip any days, right?
Now, I'm trying to go through these so that we have a balance of different artists. We've had the lovely Yoruma and Valerie Pillow and their plein air adventures, how they present the world through their lens, and then the incredible Devon Ceil Wishing and John Broio. So now let's go to a portrait painter who I just loved talking to. I thought she was an amazing person to speak to, just again, very inspiring, very hardworking and incredible work. This is my clip of my conversation with Ange Bell.
I think all artists pull in influences from different areas. And for me, because I was a sculptor, that was how I identified myself. I like the idea of, there's something about sculpture, whenever you're in the room with the sculpture, whether it's really small or whether it fills the room, it creates an atmosphere, and you have to explore the different surfaces, and you have to, or you can, view it from multiple different angles. And the thing that I always struggled with about paint was that it's a flat surface and it's a face-on reading. So my challenge then was to create interest and try and make the eye move around the surface. So that's why, often you'll find there's lots of little scratches or little flecks of colour, and that's to hopefully make the eye travel around the surface and actually make it a little bit more dynamic than just a face-on encounter.
Now, I love talking to Ange. I thought she was just, I don't know, just very interesting and just had true drive behind her work, where she was getting all of that detail in there for the interest that it would add. And in a similar way, I was very much inspired by the next artist. So I'm going to show a clip from my conversation with Anna Rose Bane.
If you're just starting out as an oil painter and you go to a store where they sell all of the supplies, it can be really overwhelming picking out your colors. Like, what colors do I start with? What materials do I use? Which brushes should I use? Which canvases? And it's hard to pull out your wallet for that too, because let's face it, those things are really expensive and the prices range from student grade to professional grade. And So that can be really intimidating. Another thing that I find, at least with the actual painting process, is that students often don't know how to start. And so we really focus on the art of the start and just how to get over that initial blank canvas. And so I'll often have them tone the canvas to get started, just to get rid of the scary white. We do simple block-ins, starting big, from big and simple to more specific after that. And so there is some methodical things that you can do to help overcome those fears. And I love teaching that. But I also love, like I said, to help them experience new things and discover different ways of approaching the canvas, or different ways to overcome their fear. So it's different with every student too, of course, because we are all expressing ourselves through our work with our different personalities. And so some people naturally are going to gravitate towards a more methodical approach, and then others want to be more spontaneous, more painterly. So that's another fun aspect of teaching as well, to kind of peg different people based on their personalities and be like, I think you would prefer line drawing versus massing in with shapes, or perhaps you tend to use less paint because you're afraid that, you're going to make it muddy. And so I always try to make them a little bit uncomfortable and challenge them to do the opposite of what they're inclined to do, based on their personality. And it's great fun.
Now, Hannah Rose Bane was such an amazing artist to talk to, because she just had this drive to her work, where she'd obviously put so much into her investment of who she was and what she was putting out there. Doesn't matter whether it was landscape, portrait, still life, it was all just fueled with this love, and that I really appreciate. In a similar way, but different of sorts, is Christine Code, and how she had made a conscious effort to dedicate herself to skyscapes. I mean, it's a landscape, but it's the majority sky. So I thought it was just incredible work. Here's a clip from my conversation with Christine Code.
I waitressed when I was younger and things like that. And then I was taking university classes. I was taking psychology. And I had a few young kids at home at the time, and I needed a way to generate some extra income. And I thought, well, I could paint and try to sell the paintings, because I always enjoyed painting. I had a fabulous high school art teacher, and she really encouraged me, and when I was younger. So I kind of picked it back up again, and this was during the daily painters movement. And so a lot of artists were selling on eBay their daily painting a day, every day on eBay. So I kind of jumped on that a little bit, and was painting small daily paintings. And I made a little money from it, and that sort of, got the ball rolling. It sort of snowballed from there.
Now, an artist who I just loved, and I was just beaming with a smile watching, was Frances Featherstone. I found her work really interesting, and I love when people can paint and talk through metaphors in their painting. So here's a clip of my conversation with Frances Featherstone.
I absolutely love doing the design. I think there's many reasons perhaps that I'm so into it. Is I worked at the BBC for quite many years, and I worked as a designer. So composition and design I find really good fun, and moving things around and trying to see what works. I absolutely love the sort of decoration and the patterns, and designing them and seeing how they relate to each other, and making some things clash, or some things sort of blend into another thing. It's such good fun. I grew up in a home where my mum's very into an arty home, and my mum's very into interior design. She wasn't an interior designer, but the first home my granddad designed in Northampton, and she painted every single room a different colour. So my bedroom was bright yellow, and my brother's was blue, and then the spare room was green. And so a sort of colour has been very important. And then the next home we lived in, it was full of like William Morris wallpaper and curtains. And then we moved to Derbyshire, and it was a little quaint little cottage with black, traditional beams. And she painted in between the beams like a dark red, and then yellow walls, and then had this mad sort of sofa which was full of patterns. And it's sort of, I realised that actually I'm sort of bringing back lots of this from my childhood. I don't know, it kind of is all coming back. Sort of these patterns and colours and the home.
Now, this has all been wonderful, beautiful, figurative painters. So let's go into some abstract. I really enjoyed having on someone who was a bit more unorthodox with their practice and very free with how she views her process of making art. So here's a clip from my conversation with Mera Waxman.
I love working big. So I work on like 70 by 70, 7 by 7, let's say. It's different measurement, right? I do not know in meters.
That's okay.
But so I like the large sizes, like 48 by 48, 36 by 36. Now and it changes all the time, Sometimes I feel working smaller. Sometimes I love to go crazy about bigger sizes. So, but I love to work on big, large. Yeah.
I loved Mera. I thought that she was such a lovely person. It was a shame about the video connection, but it just made me utilize her beautiful work on the screen. And similar to the Highlights channel, I just used this incredible slideshow of work that she has in order to decorate the video beyond what the Zoom call would grace us with. So that's that. And then another person who I was very privileged to have on as a guest is Valeria Dooka, who was the youngest artist to win the Venice Biennale, and since then has just really transformed her work into this incredible, energetic painting. And I thought she was so interesting with the way that she spoke, and I'm going to include a clip that I thought was especially interesting to me. So here's a clip of my conversation with Valeria Dooka.
I remember myself 4 years ago being very sad that all my paintings are very dramatic. And I was looking at Nicolas Uribe's paintings, and I really like him as an artist and as a human. Yeah. And they had so much softness. And and I remember very clearly, setting it for myself as a goal that I would like to achieve. But I'm not sure how did that happen exactly.
Really?
Because, I'm not. I think it's. I'm just looking now at my studio wall as well, because it's quite pastel colors and really nice. I think there's something to do with real life as well, because usually when we take photos or work with cameras, we want there to be, or the way I used to work before, I used dramatic lighting. Even if I use the camera on a normal day, it will either enhance the colors or enhance the contrast. So I don't know if I have an Android, so whenever I take my phone out, there's a little glitch. So when I open the camera app, within the first 2 seconds, it's normal settings, and then I can see the changes to the higher contrast. And very often, I go back and forth and close the app and open it again just to get it before the contrast. That's one thing. And I think I don't know, I think it's something to do with painting from life because, or like making sketches from life or just spending more time just looking like at people. So it's a lot more. You see, like before, if I had an idea about how paintings would have to be, what I wanted to say, it happened in my head. I wasn't actually looking around. I had this message, and then not from like looking of what is around me, but just because I had some anger or some frustration that I needed to get out. So the message started here, and then I would use everything around me like plastiline to make this message come through. And and then I would paint. So really, like the process was started here. But in the last few years, I think because I haven't had that such strong opinions, and actually I've been happier. You know, I had so much depression before, and all this stuff had to get out. But I've actually been much happier. So I was actually a bit sad that I was so happy, because I wouldn't have these very clear, strong ideas that I wanted to represent. So that went away. But what came was that I could have moments, a lot of moments in my day-to-day life, or of just like seeing something and being like, wow, and just like sitting for 10 seconds just to look at it, and and it's something about not being in your head, and kind of walking through life like this, but just seeing the colors around you, and I do that so much now. If I get out in the afternoon and there's this moment or very early morning, there's this moment when the houses are lighter than the sky. And oh my God, when that happens, I'm like, I can feel release of tension in my muscle. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And I can just sit and look at it,
Yeah.
And I'm no longer in my head trying to say something or not that that's bad, but when I catch myself in moments like this, I'm just like, wow. And so, or sometimes when people talk, and this happens to me constantly, and the color in my studio is a little bit pinkish, very similar to it's a little bit pinkish, and but it's like a neutral, it's a gray, it's like a warm. And so it matches a lot of people's clothes or skin tones or blah, blah, blah. And whenever I talk to a person and their sweater disappears in the background, or with my husband at home, if he's half naked and he's talking to me, but half of his body is almost invisible because it disappears in the color of the background, then it's so beautiful. So I'm like, visually, I get so much joy from just seeing that. So I think to answer your question, it's maybe to be open to look around, because these colors are in our day-to-day lives. Yeah.
And as much as I love all of this incredible figurative painting, abstract painting, and expressionistic approach to painting, it's nice to have a bit of a wildcard painter. And Mark Milroy is who I'm talking about, and his contribution to this season was so great because he has such a unique voice with his painting. And here's a clip of my conversation with Mark Milroy.
How can you bear it down to the essence or the economy of line, the economy of seeing form, composition, shape, and space, and translate that onto this two-dimensional. I love stacked space instead of this illusionistic space. And so I often work in a stacked space format. And one of my heroes is who you probably found him is Cedric Morris. And he very much worked in a stacked space, but every now and then there'd be an illusion of distance or something. And I love playing with those compositional vices, especially in my drawing. I've heard that before. Oh, it looks easy what you do, but then people try and do it. I'm so vain.
As far as expressionism goes, I would put this artist in the category of expressionism. He's a very interesting artist and a lovely person. I want to show you a quick clip of my conversation with Nik Name.
Whether you play the drums or guitar, or piano, or trumpet, or you make paintings or whatever, it's an extension of you're expressing yourself. So when I look at my visual art, it's kind of it's very intuitively. It's kind of raw. It's fast. It's always it's a lot of cutting and pasting, making collages and stuff. But that's to some extent it's the same for my music. I'm not really a skilled musician, but I just do a lot and I play a lot, and I like to work with certain vibes and do what comes at the moment and what sounds good, what feels good. I like to make art, make sound collages, and do some cutting, pasting, putting things in reverse, playing with old stuff, new stuff, combine them. It's like screwing around with music, and I like to screw around with paint or with ink or whatever. So that's how I work.
Yeah,
I like the skills, so I try to do with what I can, and I make my, don't know how to say that, my minuses, my downsides, or whatever. I try to make that my. Sorry, I can't think of the word right now.
Now, straight after our conversation, we filmed a Patreon video. And if you're not aware, the Patreon channel is linked below in the description of this episode and every episode. And I really hope you can support us through the Patreon channel. Our patrons keep this podcast going. It's the reason why we can keep this up and maintain such a steady workload of interviews with these incredible artists. And people like Nik, who just gave me this tour of his studio, but also a demonstration of how he makes his work. Things like that I think are invaluable, and that's what we upload onto our Patreon, is these extras that artists gift us with. And there are lots more to come. So anyway, on to the next clip that I want to show you. There are a couple of younger artists. I mean, Valeria Dooka is a younger artist, but there's also, I want to show you a clip from Max White, who I thought was just really interesting, very hardworking and incredible painter. So here's a clip of my conversation with Max White.
I've tried it once where I've done a plein air piece. I've taken a few photos of the scene and I've touched it up in the studio. And it was so, like, it didn't work at all after that, because the photo it was so different from the painting. And it completely threw me off. So what I tend to do now is I will take my sketchbook out and I take these color charts. I can show you. Hold
Please,
on.
yeah.
So I made these about this time last year, actually. And they're like physical charts of oil paint.
Mm.
And I'll bring those out with me and I look at the landscape and I do sketches in my books. Very, very rough sketches. And usually the actual drawing is just to indicate what was interesting about a scene. So I don't know if you can see that. That's the scene of the Thames.
Yeah.
And underneath, this is the kind of coded information that is probably the wrong way around on the screen, but it's all color notes as to what the scene looked like. And on the other side of the page is value notes. And that's pretty much what I would have done anyway if I was doing a plein air painting. But this is just a carryover from that. When I did plein air painting, I would go out and I would note down, pre-mix all these colors and in these very specific value ranges. And then I would start the painting. So what I'm basically doing is the painting prep outside and then the painting inside. I do use photos as a reference a lot of the time, but I move so much stuff around at this point. It's kind of, it's misleading to say that the photo is the reference. You know, things like I've got quite a few pieces on at the moment where it would just be unrecognizable from the photo, which I'm quite happy about because I never want to be copying a photo, and that was the whole reason for painting outside in the first place. And finding this system is kind of it's the only studio painting method that I've found that is comparable to the quality of color and value that I get from a plein air painting.
Similarly, I found a lot of effort, and not effort in a bad way, but kind of the effort that you put towards something that you're really invested in, from Owen Rival, who I just think has this beautiful way of, again, introducing metaphor, similar to Francis Featherstone or Valeria Dooka. There's this metaphor in the painting. So here's a clip of my conversation with Owen Rival.
When I was in school, I had studied illustration because the painting department at my school was a lot more conceptual and was very good if you already knew how to paint before you got there, kind of thing. But if you're like me, didn't know how to do it, it wasn't as good. And in illustration, I learned how to kind of invent things. Like one of the biggest kind of tenets of that study is learning perspective, learning how things kind of work and interact in the world. And that skill set was something I worked on for a really long time, but never really found a way to use it in my work until, you know, a little bit recently was I was kind of learning like, if I take these skills that I learned, I can now make the images I'm making not just something from a photograph per se, or like something that's just, you could photograph it, but I can also use those skills to heighten the meaning or the metaphor. So this really came through for me in this, one of the paintings I made recently. It's called Dream. It's like kind of me laid out and reflected in this landscape, and you're kind of in this landscape underneath. And one thing I really liked was, you know, obviously I could photograph myself being reflected and then an exterior behind me and all that stuff. But by adding that kind of peaceful landscape and that vibe to it, it really amplified that feeling of like, kind of like being in between a dream and reality, or like slowly emerging into that. As well as there was a painting I did a while ago in a laundry room. And this was when I had first moved into my apartment. You know, it was so hot outside, and we always had to lug the laundry from the apartment to the laundry room just because there was no in unit. And literally it felt like I was melting in there. Like it was awful. And I'd have to do it a couple times a week. And all of a sudden I just came to my, like, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a painting about this, but what if the laundry machines are melting, like quite literally like waving and melting to kind of represent that feeling. So in a lot of ways, it was using the skills I had gained to give myself more freedom with image making. And also another thing too is like, if I was kind of afraid of something, or I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to paint this, I always viewed that as a good thing. I was like, okay, like this is a good way to go into a new painting, because that means even if I fail, I'll kind of grow in some way because it's not completely in my comfort zone.
Okay, next up, after Owen, who I love talking to Owen, who was such a nice conversation and interesting to talk about how he collaborated with his wife, who I think is a real integral part of his process. She obviously contributes a lot to not only the management of framing up and the logistics of creating the reference for the paintings, but also has a keen eye for what is and isn't required in order to cap off certain pieces, which we discuss in that episode. But also, I spoke to a professional animator who says that he's not really a painter, he's a hobbyist with painting. I don't think that's true at all. I think he's an incredibly accomplished painter, and I love speaking to him and his partner, who I'm hoping to get on the podcast. But for now, it's going to be a clip of Nate Ross. So here's a clip of that conversation we had.
When I started out, I just used photo reference because it was like when you're trying to learn and you're outside doing it, you're battling. For me, I was just battling too many things, and I couldn't. And plus, you're intimidated being outside. Like and people are coming up to you and stuff. I mean, that's fine, but you're completely involved with what you're doing, and it's a battle. Like you can't. I mean, I'm still learning how to mix paint. You know what I mean? I don't know what I'm doing. So what I ended up, I would go out, shoot a bunch of reference, bring it back. I don't care about the color. I mean, Lindsay would help me correct the color. So that was good. She's a master at that. She's taught me how to color correct. So and then even just de-warp things. So right out of the gate, I had help with all that stuff. But I found that being sort of in the studio painting from reference, it gave me the opportunity to try things out and be a little more successful early on with at least just what I was doing, so that you're not just constantly sort of fighting a losing battle, I guess, so then once I was comfortable, even just mixing paint, and just getting comfortable with applying paint, because you know how that is. It's the first time, if you can remember the first time you threw oil paint down, you're just what? How does anyone do this? It is just slop fest. So you get comfortable with that. So I would get comfortable with that stuff for maybe the first year just in the studio, and then I started venturing out, and that's when the learning really started, because plein air painting for me is a tool. It's like going to school, I go outside. What I just need to learn, I do that. They're never my favorite paintings, because the ones that I like to do take a lot longer. And then maybe the scene itself is the sun is just about to go down, and I'm dude, I can't, I gotta work. I can't be in San Francisco. Plus that's 900 miles away, So we'll I'll paint from reference for my big studio paintings, but plein air painting is going to school. You learn more painting from life than you could possibly learn just, painting from a computer screen or a picture, So then I take that back to the studio. And so now when I'm working with photo reference for a show or whatever, I have the experience of going, oh, okay, so it looks like this on the screen. It's maybe the sky is very phthalo blue, and I know from painting outside that it's definitely not, and it's not going to feel right. So you kind of mesh the worlds. You learn all the stuff you need outside, and then I apply it to what I do inside.
Nate was amazing, and as I said, him and his partner have a YouTube channel. I'm going to reach out to her and have her as a guest on as soon as possible. We'll work that out. The next person who I want to talk about, who again, such a great privilege to speak to such a diverse pool of artists, and this artist is no different to that. It's again such an honor for me to have on such amazing people. And the next clip I'm going to show you is from my conversation with Maggie Sina.
Sometimes you have a happy accident and things just land. right the first time. That can happen. Mostly, I do a lot of scraping. I mean, of course, I try to see the largest, simplest shapes from the beginning. That's how to paint. You know, I have to have a structure of light and shadow, or light and not light, that is beautiful. You know, that structure is a pattern of shapes, and that pattern of shapes, it's the architecture of the whole painting. So it is the painting, and it has to start out by being comprehensible and beautiful. So that's from the beginning. That's the impetus for doing the painting, and the first thing that the painting is about. Everything else is just hanging on that. So that is the first thing I do in a tone on the painting, you know, in some sort of a neutral tone, is to find those big shapes, you know, the biggest shapes. The next division, you know, the slightly smaller shapes that come in when I'm working with color. If the universe is lined up right and all the gods are on my side, and they will just land right in the right place. Okay, that never happens. So what I do is I scrape. I put the paint down. If it's not right, I scrape it off, and I put it down anew, afresh, as if it's the first time. So I never try to correct. If it isn't perfectly magnificent, I just scrape it off and put it on again. So each time I put a stroke down, it's the first time I've ever done it. Now that takes a lot of convincing in your own mind, because after you've done it 50 times, you're really in a bad mood, and you're very angry and pissed off and furious at yourself or whatever. But I still have to put it down as if, oh, this is the most magnificent thing I've ever seen, and I know it's right. So every time I deliver the paint to the canvas, I have to get this psyched up so that the delivery process is fresh and new and magnificent and perfect. And then I just scrape it off, and each time have to redo it. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's a way. I mean, sometimes the paintings do go beyond fresh, and they die, and that's very depressing. You know, and sometimes they can be saved and sometimes they can't.
Okay, so my conversation with Maggie was just amazing. I was so happy with having her as a guest. She had, again, an incredible energy to her, which made me inspired and really admire the professional approach to being a painter and the attitude that you have to have if you're going to get your work done. Very accomplished and very admirable woman. And last but not least is someone who I actually recorded a whole episode with, only to finish off the episode and realise I hadn't pressed the record button. So, very generously, he met up with me a second time and recorded a whole other episode. An amazing guest, an incredible painter, a wonderful person. This is a snippet of my conversation with Michael John Ashcroft.
I had a small painting show at Contemporary 6 in Manchester. It was a couple of years ago now, can't remember. And that was really good. But I'd love to do like well, I've just got a load of small boards again, because I'm getting back into doing these small oils, and because I've got this camper van now. I bought a camper van. I've got me motorbike, my scrambler, my train. So we bought this camper van now, and I bought a trailer to put the motorbike on. So we're gonna go off and do some. I'm gonna go off. Well, I don't know if Debbie's gonna come, but I'm sure she will. But we're gonna go off and do some painting adventures. So I'm buzzing for that. So I've got all these little boards now. So I'm gonna get back into doing these little small, like 8x6 oils, which I used to love doing, you know.
Okay, so that is the guest list. What an amazing season it's been. Obviously in there we've also had the Christmas video and the New Year video, which is unusual for a season, but that's just how it fell last year. So that's how it rolled over the days. What we've been doing is obviously producing bonus shows as well, which we're doing once a month. But for April, we cut it a little bit short. Instead of doing a bonus show for April, we decided to get Richard and Mark Stopforth on the podcast to discuss Mark's upcoming book that was released in April 2025 and features Richard K. Blades in the book. So that's the video that we had for you there. And an amazing achievement by both of them to have this output of their work. They're both prolific painters and very creative people. Richard writes prose himself and is very into poetry and literature. And then Mark Stopforth, again, amazing painter and very interesting person, and has this ability to create this this book and put out his thoughts and feelings and insights into his work, as well as having all of this amazing body of paintings that he has out in the world. So I think that's incredible. I think we should all celebrate things like that. So that was a great honor to have him on as well. We're going to have a lot of these guests on for second episodes, I think. I'm going to wait a little bit for Yoruma's third episode because she gave us so much. I'm going to give her a chance to breathe before we do any more. But for the next season, I've already started booking guests, and I'm excited to start to introduce some of those episodes as soon as we're ready. I think this next season is going to start in June. So in the meantime, please revisit certain episodes that you haven't heard from season 1 onward. And if you've been through them all, then check out our highlights channel on YouTube. That will be linked in the description of this video and in the audio platforms. All of the guests that we have on the podcast have links to their galleries and to their websites and their social media platforms in the description of the episode. So please go and support the artists because they really deserve it. They're incredible people and very talented. And I think we should all support each other and lift up artists and make sure that they feel valued and that their work is spread around, because they make incredible work. It really does fuel the creativity of others. It's very valuable to me and to everyone, I think. So that's it for the end of season video. Sorry it was just me. I really would wish that I could have Richard every time, but he's just taken on so much that for this end of season, I thought I will just serve it up to you solo. There's been so much to talk through as far as the guests that I've had on, the highlights channel, the Patreon channel, supporting the artists and what's coming up next. Richard and I did discuss recently the concept of making a painting insights book. So that's something that's in the works at the moment. So look forward to that. We'll give you updates as soon as we have them. I hope you're well. Keep painting. Any comments, I do read them. At the moment, it's been very hard to respond to comments because of my time management issues. Life just sometimes interrupts and demands your time. So forgive me if you've left a comment and it's been months and I haven't responded. I will try to respond to them. And if not, then I'll leave a little heart, because I do love the fact that people contribute to the channels by leaving comments. Thanks for watching the final episode for this season. Next season will be starting in June. Look forward to that, and I will see you in the next episode. Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.